Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished representatives, ladies and gentlemen, a very, very good morning or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, to all of you, and a warm welcome from a sunny New York morning to this final session of the Africa Regional Review meeting. My name is Hades Cruderis-Fox, and I'm the director of the UN Office for the High Representative of Least Developed Countries, Landlocked Developing Countries, and Small Island Developing States. And it's my great honor and pleasure to moderate this final session on building climate resilience and accelerating the energy transitions in African LDCs. And before we go into the substance of our discussions today, and in order to help our meeting to run as smoothly as possible in this virtual format, let me share with you a few housekeeping rules. First, if you are speaking during the session, please keep your video on and your microphone muted while you are not speaking. And if you are not speaking during this session, you should preferably keep your microphone muted and video off during the meeting. If you are a speaker, in order to ensure everyone has a chance to speak, please keep the time allotted and wrap up if the chair requests for you to do so. And please feel free to engage in the chat, but if you have specific questions that you would like to be reviewed for the response by the panelists, please ask them in the Q&A section. This session will discuss the factors affecting the high degree of vulnerability faced by the African LDCs. It will explore how adaptation to climate change and disaster resilience efforts relate to the sustainable development of African LDCs and the mechanisms and approaches that could contribute to resilience building. The discussion will focus on ending poverty in LDCs and the important role that clean and renewable energy plays in building climate resilient development pathways. It will also explore workable solutions and concrete actions that could contribute to a better anchoring of resilience and sustainability issues as part of the new program of action for the LDCs. In particular, this session will address the following 5 issues. Number 1, discuss the ongoing trends in integrating climate ambition and energy transition into resilience planning in African LDCs. 2, explore the current climate finance landscape and recent efforts to increase access to climate finance for LDCs. 3, discuss ways to bridge the energy access gap while simultaneously supporting the implementation of national climate ambition. 4, consider the role of renewable energy in the context of COVID-19 and building back better. And finally, 5, identify challenges that need further consideration and strengthened coordination by the international community for resilience building in African LDCs. This session will include a panel of speakers, very distinguished panel of speakers, followed by an interactive segment with interventions by the lead discussion. During the interactive segment, the audience can ask the panelists questions and comment on their presentations. So please write the Q&A chat function. Please write in the Q&A function if you wish to take the floor. So with this short introduction, it is my great honor and pleasure to introduce the distinguished panelists. First, we will have the Honorable Newton Kambala, Minister of Energy of Malawi. Honorable Minister, a very warm welcome. Then followed by Mr. Francesco La Camera, who is the Director General of the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA. We will very warm welcome to you, Mr. La Camera. Mr. Mustafa Bakouri, President and CEO of the Moroccan Agency for Sustainable Energy and co-lead for the Coalition of Sustainable Energy Access. A very warm welcome to you. Mr. Eric Wanless, Director of Technology and Innovation, Power and Climate Initiative of the Rockefeller Foundation. Very nice to see you, Eric. Warm welcome. Ms. Cecilia Yenga, Head of South African Office of UNEP, very warm welcome. And Mr. Amjad Abashar, who is the Head of UNDRR's Regional Office for Africa, very warm welcome to you as well. So now we will start our discussions, and it's my great honor and pleasure to invite the Honorable Newton Kambala, Minister of Energy of Malawi. And Mr. Minister, if I may, I would like to ask you a question that we would really like to hear your views on. What are the main challenges faced in the deployment of renewable energy in Malawi? What policy and programmatic interventions are needed to increase access to clean and affordable energy for all by 2030? Mr. Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, moderator. Let me start by recognizing the presence of Francisco Lacomea, Director General, Mustafa Bakare, President and CEO of Morocco Agency, Eric Wenrese, Director of Technology and Innovation, Power and Climate Initiative, Rockefeller Foundation, Cecilia Yenga, Head of South African Office, UNEP, and Abasha, Head of UNDDR Regional Office for Africa. The challenges first in deployment of renewable energy in Malawi are quite many, but I will mention a few. One of the challenges is high initial costs, which are not affordable by many in Malawi. Renewable energy dissemination is affected by the high initial costs, especially for projects requiring energy storage. The second one is generally there is a lack of local capacity in manufacturing, distribution, installation, and maintenance of renewable energy technologies. Number three, there's lack of information on efficacy of renewable energy technologies in Malawi. And then four, limited access to financing. The money market is not well developed in general to take upon risks associated with investing, and in particular the energy sector, which is perceived to be riskier. As such, access to finance by prospective developers remain a big challenge. There's also lack of dedicated financing mechanism and limited delivery models. And then number five, an influx of substandard products is also causing a huge problem in Malawi. The influx of substandard products is a discouragement to new and future users of renewable energy products. And the country has inadequate capacity to screen out substandard products. We've got a Bureau of Standards which has the standards but lacks testing equipment to enforce the required standards. Finally, but not least, inadequate institutional capacity in higher learning institutions on renewable energy technologies. There is a deficiency in human capital with skills that are critical to renewable energy promotion, which is emanating from both the adequacy and quality of the training coming from the country's higher learning institutions. And then there's awareness. There's a general lack of awareness on the possibilities of using renewable energy resources to meet their energy needs, particularly for standalone solar systems. Socially, also, there's gender insensitivity in the promotion of renewable energy. And your second question is talking about the policies that are put in place. The policy direction of the country for renewable energy deployment adequately takes care of the areas that Malawi is facing as challenges in. We are moving towards implementation of the policies in financial incentives and the capacity building of the Malawi Bureau of Standards and higher learning institutions, then operationalization of regulatory frameworks, and then public awareness as policies. Thank you very much, moderator.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for that very important intervention and describing the kinds of challenges that Malawi is facing when you are considering your options for renewable energy, really ranging from the challenges of the technical facility, the lack of local capacity and skills, the lack of information, the access to finance and others, and also really discussing the kind of policy measures that your government is considering in order to better provide opportunities for renewable energy. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Now it is my great pleasure to invite Mr. Francesco La Camera, Director of IRENA, to take the floor. And Mr. La Camera, additional power generation capacity is needed to increase access to energy for African LDCs. So my questions to you would be, how can it be ensured this additional capacity will mainly utilize renewable energy? And then what is the role of renewables in COVID-19 recovery plans and response, and how can it help LDCs to simultaneously increase their climate ambition and accelerate energy transition? Mr. La Camera, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Minister, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues and friends, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to contribute to this important meeting today. I'd like to express my appreciation to the United Nations Office of the High Representative for the Least Developed Country, Landlocked Developed Country, and Small Island Development States for its continued efforts in moving the agenda of the Istanbul Programme of Action forward, and UNECA and the Government of the Republic of Malawi for co-organizing and host this meeting. To answer the questions, I'd like the essential need to consider the short-term response to the pandemic with the medium and long-term objective of the Sustainable Development Goal and the Paris Agreement. This is a message that we've been emphasizing at IRENA from the beginning of the pandemic, already 1 year ago, and we charted the way forward in our post-COVID recovery report. Even before the pandemic, we were not on track toward achieving SDG 7. The world's access deficit is still increasingly concentrated in sub-Saharan Africa, where more than half of the population lack access. In addition, millions of people only have minimal and unreliable electricity access. Without more urgent action, more than 620 million people globally will still be left without access to electricity in 2030, and 85% of them living in sub-Saharan Africa. The pandemic could further derail advances made unless we ensure sustainable energy is an integral part of the global response. Energy is key to achieving most of the SDG and to achieving the priority area of the Istanbul Programme of Action. By placing energy transition at the center of national recovery plan, African LDC can pave way for increased socioeconomic resilience that include reliable energy access, resilient livelihoods, and long-term social security. Africa is endowed with immense renewable, clean energy resources. Renewable energy can be a game changer in Africa's development path. They are cost competitive, fast to deploy, support energy independence and security, while reducing dependence on imported fuel. They can provide timely access to clean electricity that protects health and environment. And renewables can do so while creating millions of new jobs, stimulating industrial development along the value chains and shaping a different future for African youth. With over 60% of its population younger than 25 years old, now more than ever, the African youth required jobs and opportunity. For every $1 million invested in renewable energy, 25 jobs are being created. For Africa, our estimations show that energy transition-related investment focused on renewables, efficiency, and infrastructure will yield more jobs in the continent than in the rest of the world. Overall, renewable can provide a foundation for resilient economies and society as the effects of climate change intensify. African LDCs cannot achieve this transformation on their own. Coordinated effort from the global community and all of us will underpin efforts to close the access gap. ARENA is collaborating with UNDP and NDC partnership to support countries enhance and implement their national determined contributions. We are working with several African LDCs, including Benin, Chad, Gambia, Liberia, Mali, Mozambique, Niger, Rwanda, Uganda, and Zambia. We are working with Burkina Faso to access electrifying primary healthcare facilities as a part of the country's effort to support the overburdened health sector. The work is currently being expanded to several other countries as well. We know that access to financing, as has been just said by the Minister, is a big barrier in scaling up renewables in LDCs. Through the Climate Investment Platform, we are facilitating the creation of a pipeline of bankable projects. So far, in Africa, 97 projects worth over 38 billion have been registered, and 198 private and public partners have expressed their interest in collaborating in this region. ARENA is closely collaborating with MASEN, as well as to explore synergy for the implementation of the activities under the Sustainable Energy Access Coalition. And recently, we joined hands with Rockefeller Foundation to promote and work together on closing the gap of access to energy in Africa. Our collaboration will address key challenges hindering energy access, including access to finance. In addition, we are very pleased to be working with the UNOHRLLES on a joint report on scaling up renewable energy in LDCs, which will inform the next year LDC conference in Qatar, as well as the next 10 years program of action. The report will include recommendations and action on how to build a renewable-based and resilient energy system, close the energy access gap, and harness the associated socioeconomic and environmental benefits. ARENA, with its global membership, remains deeply committed to the African LDC agenda. We look forward to working with you with determination to leave no one behind and ensure a just, sustainable future for all. Thank you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. La Camera, for the very important presentation and really linking that the short-term COVID response needs to be in line with the medium and long-term measures to serve the goals, including the climate goals that we are all very much focused on. And also mentioning that energy really is a key factor when we are looking at most all of the SDGs and how to reach those targets. Also, it's very important what you have mentioned, linking energy to the youth and the possibilities of creating employment for the youth, which is a key factor as we are looking into the new program of action and what are the important issues. And also thank you for Irina's important work in so many of the LDCs, and we really need more of that. So thank you very much for your intervention. Now it's my great pleasure to invite Mr. Mustafa Bakouri, who is the President and CEO of Moroccan Agency for Sustainable Energy and the co-lead for Coalition for Sustainable Energy Access. The coalition project announced during the SG's Climate Summit aims to responding to the vital energy needs, especially that of LDCs. So my question to you is, what progress has been made in the operationalization of the coalition, and will it leverage partnerships and South-South cooperation to contribute to capacity building in the energy sector in LDCs? Mr. Bakouri, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup. Je remercie Madame la modératrice. Chère ministre, Excellences, chers collègues et invités en vos grades et qualités, c'est un immense plaisir de me retrouver parmi vous. Et je voudrais à ce titre aborder deux sujets qui me sont très chers, à savoir la transition énergétique et la coopération sud-sud. Et j'aimerais tout d'abord revenir sur la crise résultant de la pandémie actuelle que nous continuons de vivre. La COVID-19 est un fléau qui affecte chaque jour des populations déjà vulnérables à travers le monde, et particulièrement dans les pays les moins avancés. D'après un des rapports de la Conférence des Nations Unies sur le commerce et le développement, la CNUSED, pas moins de 32 millions de personnes de plus pourraient basculer dans l'extrême pauvreté dans les PMA. Évidemment, ce chiffre pourrait même augmenter si les perspectives de sortie de cette crise devaient se dégrader davantage. Et ceci réduit ainsi des années de progrès déjà laborieux. Cette crise participe également à l'accroissement de leur surendettement, rendant l'accès au financement encore plus difficile pour les PMA, qui ont pourtant grandement besoin de soutien financier. Et particulièrement pour accélérer la dynamique de développement de l'accès à l'énergie, un secteur, comme nous savons tous, qui constitue l'un des piliers de tout programme de développement, car il se trouve au carrefour de tous les secteurs socio-économiques. Il est donc impératif de trouver des solutions pour faire face à cette situation. Et à ce titre, il est important d'initier un programme qui doit être ambitieux pour accompagner les PMA, les LDCs, mais aussi les autres pays en développement, les ODCs. À structurer des projets bancables qui répondent aux meilleurs standards et qui, sur la base des meilleures pratiques, et qui ont déjà fait leurs preuves ailleurs. Et heureusement, dans ce secteur de l'énergie, en particulier de l'énergie durable, les exemples de réussite sont assez nombreux pour améliorer l'attractivité pour les investissements et les financements dont ils ont tant besoin. C'est dans ce sens que au Maroc, sous la conduite de Sa Majesté le roi Mohamed VI, pour l'implémentation d'une approche de développement durable soucieuse de la préservation de notre environnement, et dans le cadre d'une coopération sud-sud renforcée, le Maroc a pris l'initiative d'asseoir une politique de dialogue et de coopération contribuant positivement aux efforts de la communauté internationale en faveur de l'accès à une énergie propre et durable pour tous. Cet engagement s'est traduit notamment par le lancement avec l'Éthiopie de la coalition lors du sommet onusien Action pour le climat à New York, de la coalition pour l'énergie durable en faveur des PMA et autres pays en développement. Et à cet égard, la coalition pour l'accès durable à l'énergie entend faciliter la liaison entre les initiatives et institutions existantes, qui est d'ailleurs l'occasion de coopérer avec certaines institutions présentes ici. Je voudrais saluer Irena et Francesco, et saluer aussi SA4All et les organisations émanant de l'ONU. Et la coalition leur fournira donc à ces pays l'accompagnement nécessaire pour mobiliser les institutions partenaires et accélérer l'implémentation des projets d'accès à l'énergie. Par ailleurs, puisque nous pensons que les meilleures pratiques peuvent être tirées des expériences de certains pays du Sud, les plus avancés, la coopération Sud-Sud figure parmi les principes clés fondateurs de cette coalition. D'ailleurs, un centre d'expertise principal sera mis en place pour favoriser les échanges techniques entre les pays du Sud. Aussi, des événements de haut niveau abriteront également des séances d'échange entre les pays du Sud afin de favoriser le partage d'expériences et des meilleures pratiques. Enfin, fort de notre expérience réussie dans les énergies renouvelables, nous avons la ferme conviction que l'innovation et les technologies nouvelles sont également des aspects primordiaux pour faire de cette dynamique un nouveau levier de développement économique et industriel des pays du Sud. Dans ce sens, la coalition, avec le soutien de l'UNIDO, travaillera à renforcer le développement de l'innovation et l'intégration industrielle dans les pays du Sud. Cette thématique étant d'ailleurs d'une importance majeure pour nous, pays du Sud, en quête de nouveaux leviers de développement industriel, j'ai le plaisir de vous annoncer que le Maroc a été désigné depuis quelques jours champion mondial du thème Innovation, technologie et données dans le cadre du dialogue onusien de haut niveau sur l'énergie en 2021. Nous sommes donc fortement engagés à réaliser la promesse onusienne de l'agenda 2030, Leave No One Behind. Et pour encadrer toute cette démarche, nous avons également entrepris la définition d'une feuille de route avec le PNUD, comprenant les différentes actions concrètes nécessaires à l'opérationnalisation de ce projet. Ce plan est en cours de finalisation et sera examiné dans un avenir proche par le comité consultatif de la coalition qui est composé de plusieurs institutions, dont d'ailleurs IRENA, SA4All, et l'ONUD et les pays concernés, les pays des régions concernées par ce programme. Et je dois, pour finir, dire qu'avec votre soutien, avec votre mobilisation, notre mobilisation à tous, pour une approche plus juste et inclusive des PMA et des pays en développement, je crois que nous pourrons construire un futur plus sûr, plus équitable et j'espère le plus durable possible. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bakurio, of that excellent presentation. And you very much, like Mr. Lacamera, also enforced the message that energy is really in the crossroads of all the different development efforts, and important for all the efforts that we are doing. And thank you also for your commitment and the commitment of the coalition to clean energy and the work that you are doing in so many of the African LDCs at the moment. I take note of the work also putting forward these ideas of lessons learned and also in the context of the South-South cooperation, which I think is very relevant to many of the LDCs. Thank you very much. Next, it's my great pleasure to invite Mr. Eric Wanless, Director of Technology and Innovation, Power and Climate Initiative of Rockefeller Foundation. Eric, as you know, many LDCs have not been able to benefit significantly from the new technologies and the falling costs in renewables to bridge their energy access gap. So what are the key technical, financial, and social challenges to develop sustainable energy system in currently underserved areas within the African LDCs, and how, in your opinion, can these be overcome? The floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you, distinguished guests, for sharing the time with me, and thank you, Director Scudder-Fox, for moderating. I want to start by saying I sincerely wish I was in Malawi, and we were all in Malawi for this, the warm heart of Africa. It has a special place in my own heart, and hope to see everyone there in the coming year. I want to start by saying that the foundation has made an unprecedented billion-dollar commitment to green and equitable recovery, largely in response to COVID-19, but also to meet the moment that we are at. Much of this is going to be focused on the development and investment in distributed renewable energy in collaboration with key partners such as IRENA, and also very focused on countries like Malawi. And in very general terms, there are three elements of what we're trying to do with partners. The first is really country-driven work to create the enabling environment and identify DRE investments, similar to some of the work that has already been happening, again, in countries like Malawi. Another part of the work will be focused on transactions and innovation to drive down the cost, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more depth. And then there's a piece around data, knowledge, and advocacy to really increase the visibility and understanding of DRE and the role that they can play, distributed renewable energies, in driving economic development. So part of the response and sort of how we drive investment of renewables, and specifically distributed renewable energy, is we need to make sure that they are the least cost, most reliable, and most resilient generation. And the good news is that they're already there in many places of the world. So on the cost front, really driven by the cost declines of battery storage, 90% over the last 10 years, and similar declines in solar photovoltaic, there's some really transformational things that are happening. And for example, as a result of those cost declines today in the United States, where there's some of the very cheapest and fully developed coal and natural gas resources in the world, it is now cheaper to build new generation assets that leverage a combination of renewables, demand response, energy storage, and energy efficiency than building new coal and gas generation. And in less than 2 years, it is going to be cheaper to build new resources based on renewable systems than to operate existing fossil resources. So we're already there on the cost front. On the reliability front, a system built on distributed renewable energy is inherently more reliable than a traditionalized thermal system for a lot of technical reasons. But just anecdotally, if you look at the solutions that are being developed in places like Nigeria, where we have distributed renewable energy supporting the grid and showing improvement there, or if we look at the things that happened in Texas, again in the United States a few weeks ago, those sorts of things are mitigated by distributed renewable energy. On resilience, for the same reasons as reliability, distributed renewable energy is the technology or set of technologies. And if you take Malawi, for example, of course, there's IDA, but also if you look at the generation mix in Malawi, the country is very, very dependent on the Shiri River. And so there's an opportunity to transform the system from reliance on central resources that are concentrated on specific technologies to be much more diverse and robust. So we are there on the cost, reliability, and resilience, and we just need to make sure that the benefits and this disruption show up in LDCs. And so part of what the foundation is doing to address that and sort of address some of the barriers that we see, it's really about bringing scale, capital, and understanding to the place. And so we have an effort underway to transform 10,100 kilowatt systems and help them appear as one gigawatt project with all the finance, the low cost and regulatory regimes that accompany large utility scale efforts. And so it's really about how do we create standardization, how do we aggregate those projects, and how do we, again, make sure that we have these distributed projects and all the benefits and cost reductions that they have show up in LDCs. And that's core to what the foundation is trying to do with again, partners such as IRENA and with countries like Malawi. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Eric Panelist, for that excellent presentation of the work that Rockefeller Foundation is doing in this field, which is a lot, and I know we have worked closely together with you in the past as well. But when I'm listening to you and I listen to what the Minister of Malawi discussed in the beginning of this, and putting in what the challenges for the country such as Malawi are, I think that the points that you have made on bringing scale bringing capital and bringing the understanding and the technical know-how to the picture is really the answer of what the challenges that he has described for the country are. So thank you again for, I think scaling up all of these efforts is a really important part. So thank you very much for your presentation and for the work that Rockefeller Foundation does in many LDCs. Now it's my great pleasure to invite Ms. Cecilia Yenga, who is the head of South Africa office of UNEP. So for you, we know, what policy interventions do you think are required to meet the adaptation challenges to climate change facing Africa over the next decade? We are looking at the new program of action for the next decade. And what are the barriers and enablers to accessing adaptation funding for enhancing resilience? Ms. Yenga, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Heidi, and thank you very much, honorable ministers and my colleagues in the development sector for giving UNEP an opportunity to participate in this very distinguished panel. I'd like to start my presentation by sharing with you an African proverb. And he whose house is burnt down knows why the ashes are a fortune. And this African proverb aptly personifies Africa's predicament and offers the understanding of the changing climate. It's akin to a house on fire. And whenever a house is burning, several factors come into play. First, the owners try to put out the fire as fast as they can using the tools and resources that are available to them. And secondly, as they try to put on the fire, they try to identify the risk to ensure that that risk is reduced or eliminated altogether. And thirdly, inaction is never an option as we stand to lose everything that we have put in place. As I speak to the question I have, I want to highlight a couple of issues that, today we are facing a global climate emergency. Then even though Africa is home to a majority of LDCs, our contribution is very little to global warming. But the continent is disproportionately vulnerable to the impact of climate change. And given our geographical position, this continent is particularly vulnerable due to the considerably limited adaptive capacity that we continue to experience. And moreover, it's exacerbated by the interaction of multiple biophysical, political, and socioeconomic stress factors. And of course, widespread poverty across the continent. Climate change is particularly a threat to a continued economic growth of Africa and to the livelihoods of vulnerable people, both in the rural areas, in urban informal settlements, and in the small island states across the continent. To date, what we are seeing is that climate is really impacting on our GDP. I'll not quote the statistics. I have them on the screen for you. And assuming that our international efforts keep global warming below the 2 degrees centigrade, the continent would still require climate change adaptation costs that will exceed at least 50 billion by the year 2050. So we really have quite a lot on our plate as an African continent. I'd also like to really not go through various slides, but also to highlight that what would be required is a socio-economic growth and an economic growth that would contribute to at least the creation of at least 75,000 jobs, and 50,000 of all these jobs could be derived and generated from transitions to a green economy. Africa, the lives and livelihoods, we know that the COVID-19 epidemic has also been a major emergency, of course, exacerbating the already continued challenge that we are facing as an African continent. But I just wanted to highlight what UNEP's contribution has been in this space. And every year we do produce what we call the emissions gap report, basically looking at how do we support member states to supporting their ambition to a much more zero emissions economy, and basically looking at technologies and technological innovation that can drive towards this realization. Of course, focusing a lot on the reducing fossil fuel subsidies, and of course, looking at an end to opening up new coal plants across the continent. And more importantly for us here in the African continent is looking at nature-based solutions, and particularly because we are a continent derives a lot of our economy and our livelihood from nature and from our soils, agriculture, restoring landscapes, and also working on reforestation. I'd like to look at some of the findings of the 2020 Global Emissions Report. And again, as you will see from this report, energy sits very centrally in terms of where we would position Africa if we were to transition. And the key sectors are basically energy, looking at industry, agriculture and food, forests and land use, transport and buildings and cities as being very much at the heart of where we would require strong green policies that would really set Africa on a pathway to a much more green economy future. Various frameworks available for us. We do know that many countries have already prepared their nationally determined considerations. There are elements where we've had an opportunity to address adaptation, of course, to look at mitigation, but very centrally for Africa, to look at recovery that focuses also on agriculture and clean energy policies and the interaction between energy, food, water, the whole nexus in terms of seeing the interrelationships between those sectors. Clean energy, which is really part of, the Paris Agreement, Article 7, talks about the need to balance mitigation and adaptation. And we are not looking for sophisticated responses. We are looking for responses that really address the very need of our communities. And that image is exemplary of what we require in our rural areas. Clean energy, when of course coupled with a solution-based approach that deals with the very needs of our agricultural communities or our farmers out there to ensure that they're able to dry, to store, and to get their produce to the markets in a healthy state is basically what we are looking for, and not necessarily sophisticated elements. So a combination of looking at how we can combine good soils, good approaches to farming, but combining it with clean energy would ensure, that we are leading to increased yields and, of course, improved livelihoods within the African continent. And of course, while 90% of the Africans are in the informal sector, operating outside the mainstream banking system, we are also looking at a combination where we address and look at innovative financing mechanisms that would allow increased access for these resources. I will not go on to that, but I just want to look at a policy framework. So a finance policy that addresses the needs, whether it's agriculture or transport needs and clean energy, but also looking at a clean energy policy that responds to the very needs of our continents and combining renewables, but also looking at microgrids, but also national standard bodies playing a significant role. I do not want to preempt the whole issue of nature-based solutions and initiatives as part of the adaptation response, but also the need for policy harmonization, etc. And in conclusion, I'd just like again to highlight an African proverb: a bridge in Africa a lot of times is only prepared when someone falls into the water. And I think we're really talking about the importance of us mitigating risk, but also having the preparedness through multilateral and intergovernmental processes, but also at national level, having robust policies and national determined considerations that really address both the adaptation and the mitigation side of things. Thank you very much, Heidi.
Thank you very much, Cecilia, for that excellent presentation and sharing with us these wise African proverbs. Thank you. And also to reminding us very importantly that inaction is never an option. That's a very important message that you have given. And like many previous speakers, linking the energy options to job creation and youth. Thank you also for sharing the information on this important report that UNEP has done. And I think that as we didn't have a chance to really focus on the details of that report, if you are willing, that would be an interesting report to share in the chat function if that is available. Now it's my great pleasure to invite Mr. Amjad Abashar, the head of UNDRR's Regional Office for Africa, to make a presentation. And to you, Amjad, I'd like to ask, what is the progress made and the main challenges encountered towards achieving the targets of the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction in African LDCs, which is a very important part of the challenges that African LDCs are facing. Amjad, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Director, and a warm thanks also. It's a pleasure for me to be with the honorable ministers today, and thank you for hosting this. A special thanks to Malawi also for kindly hosting this important event. The Sendai framework, I mean, it really is an important blueprint for disaster risk reduction. It's the first of the post-2015 agreements that took place prior to the Paris Agreement and the SDGs. Its overall goal really is to prevent new and reduce existing disaster risk. It does so through providing guidance under 4 headings or 4 priorities related to risk governance, risk knowledge, investment, as well as building back better. And as you said, Madam Director, it has 7 targets which countries are supposed to meet by 2030. Now, I want to focus my intervention really on 3 particular areas. One of them is the issue of risk governance, followed by some intervention, a small intervention on risk knowledge, and also investment and financing for disaster risk reduction. Now, 90% of disasters that are happening around the world and in Africa in particular are really climate-related events. So it's critical that countries ensure that disaster risk reduction strategies and climate adaptation approaches or agendas or strategies are complementary or coherent. The first target that countries are supposed to meet of all of the 7 targets of the Sendai framework is to develop a disaster risk reduction strategies. I mean, there's been satisfactory progress made in Africa, in particular, the area where I'm based, where we have 15 LDCs already in Africa that are already reporting on their national strategies. However, the financing of these strategies and the implementation of these strategies still face a lot of challenges, obviously mostly due to capacity constraints. So if we go to the next slide. Okay, thank you very much. I was just talking about the importance of having the links between climate risk and disaster risk, and the importance of not separating. They overlap in many ways. They overlap in terms of budgets that governments have, and they overlap, of course, in terms of substance. So we have been working here in UNDRR to support countries to develop coherent strategies by integrating climate change into our strategies, or vice versa. However, we do have some challenges that we often face when it comes to these processes. First of all, we discovered that there's still a lot of even though there's a lot of common ground between disaster risk reduction approaches and climate change adaptation, there is still I wouldn't say a sort of a lack of cooperation, not intentional, but certainly lack of cooperation, lack of communication across the sectors. And that's important to ensure that we have strong governance systems between disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation practitioners, because that's the only way we can ensure long-term resilience. And also, as I mentioned earlier, there needs to be a discussion on how to invest and support the disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation through adequate budgets. On the next slide, I wanted to quickly move on to the issue of risk knowledge. We have a lot of countries in Africa do not have disaster loss databases that enable them to actually understand where the risk rise and have a historical understanding of where disasters occur. Data has shown, global data has shown that we actually have about 2 disasters a week in Africa, which is quite a lot. Some of them are intensive, some of them are extensive, so you don't always hear about it, but they are recorded. But we don't have national recording databases that are sufficient enough to enable risk-informed investments in the future. So one of the ways that we're trying to work with countries is to develop probabilistic disaster risk profiles on floods and droughts, and we've done about 16 work with 16 countries that you see on the list there that have worked to develop these risk profiles, and they're important in the sense that they can also inform the national disaster risk reduction strategies, because you have to have a risk assessment to understand your risk before you're able to apply a strategy. Now, if we go to the next slide, I'll just go over quickly some of the importance of the important ways to apply risk profiles. First of all, they do enhance risk awareness. They can increase policy coherence. You'll understand, particularly vis-a-vis climate change approaches and disaster risk reduction. They're important to support development planning and climate adaptation plans. And they can also be used to inform land use and urban planning, because they give you an idea. These risk profiles can give you an idea of where the risk may occur 50 years and even 100 years in the future through a probabilistic model that we provide. Now, in the next slide, linked to the risk profiles, we also carried out these budget reviews in the 16 countries to understand better how much money, if at all, is going into, or how much percentage of national budgets is actually going into disaster risk reduction. So our survey and our reviews in cooperation with the 16 countries I mentioned showed that direct investment in disaster risk reduction is really not more than 1% of a country's budget on average. If we can count indirect disaster risk reduction investment, that figure goes up to 4%. But so there's still a lot of work to ensure that we actually mainstream disaster risk reduction activities in our models. On the next slide, just to highlight some of the key challenges that I've sort of alluded to, we still don't have enough access to budget-related data when it comes to how much money is going to disaster risk reduction. So some political support is needed in that sense. Secondly, there's very clear not
would like
strong
to
enough
just kindly
collaboration.
ask you to conclude in about 1 minute.
Yes, okay. So there's also the issue of collaboration across sectors, and it's important to ensure that we are able to get all the sectors and authorities in the government working together. On the last slide, I just wanted to leave you with just a few messages. Important to recommendations to ensure a whole of government, whole of society approach to ensure that the coherent development of disaster risk reduction and climate change strategies. It's also important to strengthen the dialogue among the ministries of finance and planning, as well as DRR and CCA structures. and also to ensure that national statistics offices play their role in terms of collecting disaster loss data and supporting governments in having a hub for that data. So thank you, Madam Director, for the time. I end there.
Thank you very much for that excellent presentation and the focus on the importance of DRR work. I think when you mentioned that we have 2 disasters a week on the African continent, this really brings into our mind the importance of the work that you are doing. I think the themes that you have mentioned, risk governance, risk knowledge, and risk financing, is very much the same themes that come through in all of these different discussions that we are having today. So I would really, from my heart, thank you panelists for your excellent contributions. I think that they have given us a great way to move forward to our interactive discussion. And we are now very privileged to have excellent lead discussions that will take the floor. And it's my great honor and pleasure to invite the Honorable Jean Kapata, MP, Minister of Lands and Natural Resources of Zambia, to take the floor. Madam Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Moderator. Your Excellencies, distinguished panelists, allow me to congratulate my colleague ministers from Malawi for hosting this very important meeting. I'm also delighted to be part of this important discussion on building resilience and accelerating the energy transition in least developed countries. As we all know, least developed countries face a range of pressures and challenges that undermine their economic and social development efforts and their achievement of all the sustainable development goals. Climate change is the most serious present-day threat to human and natural systems globally and adds to these already existing pressures. It is a threat multiplier tied to almost every major environmental and developmental challenge the world faces. Africa is home to 33 of the 46 LDCs, and as such, building climate resilience and accelerating the energy transition in the African LDCs must be a top priority. Adapting to climate change has become an essential component of any planning processes in all countries, particularly in the LDCs. For the LDCs and other vulnerable countries, climate change adaptation is a matter of survival of our vulnerable communities and fragile economies. While there is some progress towards improving energy efficiency and expanding access to electricity globally, significant deficits are increasingly concentrated in the sub-Saharan Africa. Energy access in Africa LDCs remain low, as less than 30%. Therefore, stepped up efforts are required to enable universal energy access and accelerate the transition to renewable energy and energy efficiency in all the LDCs. Globally and within LDCs, we now have a good understanding of climate change risks and potential adaptation solutions. In fact, while the LDCs remain vulnerable, they are the champions of adaptation to climate change, addressing the most complex issues of our time, starting with national adaptation programs of action developed 20 years ago. We therefore have a solid ground to create enhanced support mechanisms for the LDCs to scale up their work on climate change adaptation and therefore strengthen resilience. Presently, all LDCs are putting in place their first national adaptation plans that will pave way for tracking medium and long-term adaptation needs of the LDCs. It is therefore crucial and to ensure that each one is supported to make these plans operational and implement concrete adaptation actions. Coming from an LDC country, Zambia, myself, climate change has adversely affected our energy security. Until a month ago, my country, which relies heavily on hydropower, generated electricity, experienced serious energy deficit due to reduced water levels in our reservoirs, which meant rationing power supplied to our communities. In some cases, this meant households and businesses going without power for up to 12 hours in a day. However, government has worked hard to increase the ratio of other renewable energy sources, particularly solar, in our energy mix. Coupled with a good rain season that we have experienced this year, this has resulted in no more generation and load shedding as the rationing of the power was known and has now ended. The COVID-19 pandemic has clearly demonstrated that the collapse of the global supply chain system largely crippled the weakest in the system. The LDCs for managing the situation in recovery efforts and jumping to the new ways of development. COVID-19 has also taught us that resilience on external systems and products is not only unsustainable, but present unprecedented challenges. With the restriction in travel, all the support that could have been possible through external experience is not practical. The LDCs must therefore be supported to build long-term capacity and systems. In my own conclusion, Zambia would have, we had to strike a delicate balance in ensuring we protect our population from the COVID pandemic. At the same time, we ensured the wheels of the economy continued running to avoid a total collapse of the economy. Therefore, it did not have a total shutdown, an indication that we may soon be turning the corner. As I conclude my remarks, I wish to emphasize that being the most vulnerable, the LDCs must remain a priority under the UN system and the development community to enable them catch up with the rest of the world. A unified UN-led support system with special programs per region to support the LDCs to address climate change is critical. Therefore, efforts must be elevated to support all African LDCs to support human assets, diversify their economies, and build resilience to present and future shocks, and to achieve the goals of the 2030 agenda, as well as the Africa Agenda 2063. While the COVID-19 pandemic is the most urgent threat facing humanity today, we cannot forget that climate change is the biggest peril confronting civilization over the longer term. In fact, climate action through the implementation of the Paris Agreement will not only address climate change, but help the world build forward from COVID-19 and other shocks we are yet to encounter. I thank you most sincerely, all of you, for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for that excellent presentation. Your message is so clear. The international community, the UN system, and all of our partners must focus on LDCs. And I think that the opportunity for this LDC5 conference is really there to garner the support and build the further partnerships, because more needs to be done. It's absolutely clear. And thank you also for your very strong message describing through Zambia's own experience on the importance of the challenges of climate change, and your view that climate resilience and adaptation strategies and energy access really should be some of the key priorities for the new program of action that need to be addressed. So thank you very much for that, Honorable Minister. Now it's my great honor and pleasure to invite Honorable Mohapi Mohapinyane, Minister of Energy and Meteorology of Lesotho, to take the floor. Honorable Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you, moderator, excellencies, and ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, moderator, for giving me the floor. At the outset, I wish to indicate that Lesotho, like other LDCs, remains committed and at the top of action in championing climate action and accelerating energy transition. The least developed countries, LDCs, face a range of pressures and challenges that undermine the economic and social development efforts and the achievement of all the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Climate change is the most serious present-day threat to human and natural systems globally, and adds to these pressures. In Lesotho, extreme weather events have increased in frequency and magnitude, resulting in loss of lives and property. Access to climate finance to increase resilience to climate change impacts and reduce greenhouse emission remains a challenge in Lesotho, like in many other LDCs. In our effort to strengthen resilience and adaptive capacity to climate-related hazards and natural disasters, Lesotho prepared a National Adaptation Program of Action, NAPA, in 2007, which outlined priorities to build resilience and reduce the vulnerability of people of Lesotho to climate change impacts. Moderator, the government of Lesotho development the National Strategic Development Plan, NSDP2, with the objective of achieving climate resilience and low carbon development, as well as increasing access to sustainable energy. In 2017, Lesotho formulated the National Climate Change Policy and National Climate Change Policy Implementation Strategy and Sustainable Energy Strategy. The policy's long-term vision is to build a climate change resilience and low carbon pathways, including a prosperous, sustainable economy and environment in Lesotho. In June 2018, Lesotho submitted her updated nationally determined contributions NDC report to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, committing to unconditionally lower her net greenhouse gas emissions by 10% by 2030. To further push for an additional 25% greenhouse gas emission reduction on condition that external support in finance, investment, technology, development and transfer, and capacity building is made available to cover the full cost of implementing the adaptation and mitigation actions. Furthermore, there are several initiatives and programs implemented by the government of Lesotho to address climate change, such as integrated catchment management, the improvement of early warning system, the formulation of a national adaptation plan, the improving adaptive capacity of vulnerable and food insecure populations in Lesotho, as well as mainstreaming climate change into our development programs. Moderator, turning to energy, for Lesotho, like many other LDCs, access to is relatively low, 49% household connections. Almost all electricity generated locally comes from hydro energy, which is highly dependent on the availability of good rains. With ongoing climate change, Lesotho is experiencing increased frequency and intensity of droughts, which exert pressure on hydropower generation. To address the energy challenges, Lesotho has developed the Electrification Master Plan in order to accelerate electricity access, the Lesotho Solar Thermal Technology Roadmap to promote solar thermal applications, and established the Lesotho Electricity Generation Company to improve electricity generation through renewable energy sources. In addition to this, there are ongoing and pipelined activities aimed at accelerating the clean energy transition in Lesotho, such as solar street lighting and the Lesotho Renewable Energy and Energy Access Project and the Sustainable Energy for All project. COVID-19 pandemic has clearly demonstrated that the collapse of the global supply chain systems disproportionately crippled the weakest in the system, the LDCs. It has also taught us that reliance on external systems and products is not only unsustainable, but also presents unprecedented challenges. With the restrictions on travel, all the support that would have been possible through external expertise is no longer accessible. In this instance, the moderator, we call on We call on our development partners to support long-term capacity development in LDCs in order to build resilience to climate change. Again, in an effort to ensure that LDCs are better positioned to build resilience to climate change and natural disasters, Lesotho wishes to recommend that, as the most vulnerable, the LDCs must remain a priority under the UN system and the development community to enable them to catch up with the rest of the world. A unified UN-led support system with special programs per regions to support the LDCs to address climate change and energy shortage should be put in place. We consider the establishment of a UN Technology Bank for the LDCs one of the first achievements of the SDG target 7.8, that would help strengthen science and technology innovations essential to development, and therefore we call on the donor countries to support the UN Technology Bank so that it can execute its mandate to LDCs successfully. Efforts must be elevated to support all African LDCs to build human assets, diversify the economies, and build resilience to present and future shocks. Improving access and simplifying modalities for climate finance and requisite conditionalities will ensure that countries like Lesotho are on the track to maintaining a climate resilient and low carbon pathway, thus bringing the attainment of the SDGs within reasonable reach. With these few remarks, I wish to thank everyone for their attention, and that's the end of our speech as Lesotho. Madam Moderator, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for that excellent presentation. Really interesting to hear the focus on the climate change and building resilience, and also how Lesotho has set up your climate change resilience and low carbon strategy. And also importantly, that you have mainstreamed your these strategies into your development plan. I think that is very important for us, for that to be, those to be effective. That's excellent. And also, I really hear your call on these broad partnerships. So having development partners, North and South, at the widest possible to come and support the LDCs. I also thank you for putting forward those very concrete recommendations. That is excellent. And as we are looking into the conclusions of this meeting and what the recommendations are, this is very, very useful. And I hear from you, as well as the Minister of Zambia, that the importance of keeping LDCs in the forefront of the UN agenda, that is important. And it is clear that LDC5 conference next January in Doha will be a key moment for the international community to come together and to discuss what are the priorities, how can we build back better after COVID, and what does it mean in concrete terms for the LDCs, and how can the wider partnerships be built to really help all LDCs reach the SDG goals as well. So thank you very much for that presentation. Now it is my great honor and pleasure to invite the Honorable Nancy Tembo, MP, Minister of Forest and Natural Resources of Malawi. Madam Minister, you have the floor.
Madam Moderator, fellow ministers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, my presentation will focus on the question for UNEP, which is in two parts. I'll break it down. The first part will be broken down into 5 parts. And the question is, policy and interventions required to meet adaptation challenges to climate change facing Africa over the next decade include developing implementable national adaptation plans. As most developing countries, African developing countries, LDCs, are participating in the National Adaptation Plan, but also formulating their plans, it will be important to utilize this process to prioritize our adaptation needs and develop implementable NAPs. In Malawi, the National Adaptation Plan process is currently underway. The NAP will identify medium and long-term adaptation priorities for the country and contribute to long-term community and ecosystem resilience. Our NAP will focus on agriculture, energy, forestry, wildlife, tourism, and human health sectors. Availability of local and international finances and mainstreaming of adaptation actions in the national and sectoral plans strategies will be critical to support strong implementation of these frameworks. The second part is mobilization and provision of dedicated climate finance for adaptation and resilience building. We are aware that for most of our nations, our climate resilience investment areas are well outlined and prioritized in our various strategic frameworks. But the challenge remains dedicated adaptation financing to implement these programs. Here in Malawi, in an effort to harmonize climate change management, we have established a National Climate Change Fund so that it serves as a national basket for implementation of various climate-related projects. However, capitalization of the fund is still a challenge, although the ministry is working tirelessly to access domestic resources through the national budget and related levies and taxes. For instance, the government has introduced a carbon levy on fuel. This levy is part of our domestic mobilization of resources, and it signifies a political commitment towards climate change mitigation and adaptation in our economically constrained country. Additionally, we're working towards improving our capacity to access finance from multilateral climate financing mechanisms such as the Green Climate Fund through various sectoral trainings and accreditation of our national level organizations to serve as executing partners of the GCF remains a challenge. I believe these same challenges are applicable to most of the LDC's countries. The third one is investing meaningfully into adaptation and resilient action in local communities whilst taking into consideration nature-based solutions. We need to implement adaptation and resilience actions which are responding to urgent needs of the local communities. As LDCs, we have to ensure that the national and international climate finances should reach down to the local communities so that their adaptive and resilient capacity is improved. I encourage fair front-runner countries for the LDCs initiative for effective adaptation and resilience, LIFE-Air, to take this initiative as an opportunity for meaningful investments to enable building climate resilience in local communities. One of the principles of this initiative is that at least 70% of the climate funds should be spent on local communities where climate impacts are most felt. Fourthly, establishing strong and meaningful local, bilateral, and multilateral partnerships and strengthening them where they already exist. Strong partnerships will facilitate transfer of finance, technology, and technical expertise as we are dealing with devastating impacts of climate change. The partnerships have to start with strong engagement with the local communities, where they should be actively involved in the planning and implementation of adaptation initiatives so that they are not left behind. The international partnerships are also very critical, considering that climate change is a global problem. Malawi has partnered with the governments of the UK, Netherlands, Egypt, Bangladesh, and St. Lucia to champion climate resilience and adaptation strand under the United Nations Coalition on Adaptation. Through this initiative, we are confident that we will be able to steer Malawi to become a climate resilient nation where adaptation is placed at the core of national planning decision-making processes. The initiative will ensure urgent action is taken to protect our people, economies, and the environment, and that no person is left behind in addressing the impacts of climate change that our country is grappling with. The last part of the first part of the question is promoting alternative sources of energy. Among the pressing issues in our communities is over-reliance on biomass for cooking, which is resulting into rampant deforestation. To deal with this problem, emphasis has to be made on providing alternative sources of energy to local communities. For example, through the use of LPG, solar briquettes, and biomass. And I must add that we are currently working with the Ministry of Energy to, as a matter of agency, identify alternative sources of energy. We realize that this far we have made effort, but they've been really piecemeal and really not covering the entire breadth of the country. So the Ministry of Energy is currently now working to come up with an alternative that can be used throughout the country. And the last part of the question is barriers and enablers to accessing adaptation funding for enhancing resilience. The barriers, the most, I think, important barrier is limited local expertise to develop quality project concepts and funding proposals to meet the standards required by the bilateral and the multilateral funding instruments. There is financing out there, but for us to be able to access that has been a challenge because the lack of expertise on the ground. And what we're doing now is accessing funds to develop that local capacity. And of course, there is the bureaucratic and stringent procedures to access that climate funding. The third one will be the top-down approach, where funding agents have conceived priority thematic areas to be supported without input from the local communities. Like I said earlier on, we have to involve the local communities in planning and implementing. And when we are putting together the approaches to funding, oftentimes the procedures are imposed on us. We have to start from the bottom to the top in order to make it less cumbersome for countries to access this funding. And I will thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for that excellent presentation of Malawi's national adaptation plans, focusing really on the issues of climate change, and the same themes again are coming up: access to financing, the need for capacity training, setting up relevant policies, and the importance of partnerships, as you have described. And very interesting to hear the kinds of partnerships that you in Malawi have already set out for you. Thank you for that very, very interesting presentation. Now it's my great pleasure to invite Mr. Brian Dean, who is the lead of Energy Efficiency and Cooling, Sustainable Energy for All. Brian, you have the floor.
Great, thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure listening to all the speakers so far. I hope I can bring an interesting and different angle as the head of energy efficiency at Sustainable Energy for All, which is, what we need energy for is the services that they provide, including supporting resilience through nutrition, health, comfort, and human safety. And as we do our planning and we do our investment decisions, our efforts are really pushing towards looking for solutions that first reduce the need for energy, and then investing in those solutions that deliver sustainable, renewable energy to meet those energy needs. And as head of energy efficiency, I'm really here to talk a lot about the energy efficiency angle of this. And energy efficiency can enable, that gigawatt of renewable energy that Mr. Wanless spoke about, that it can deliver many more services than in a non-energy efficient approach. And energy efficiency solutions are really critical for both energy access and energy transition. Ghana is an interesting country which actually used energy efficiency to increase their energy access dramatically over a decade, really. Cooling is an interesting example, though, of a cross-sectoral issue where efficiency and renewables play a really important part together. And cooling supports health during this time of COVID. That's become everybody's number one attention. Of course, health, nutrition, productivity, education, and more. Cooling really supports a number of sectors, a number of our key development issues. Energy efficiency measures like cool roofs, external shading, community cooling centers, and nature-based solutions, which we've heard for adaptation reasons. Nature-based solutions like trees can actually cool buildings, can make it easier for students to learn in a school, when placed properly within a city, can ensure that distribution of vaccines can make it from point A to point B without temperatures rising too high. Risk planning efforts are also really a big part of this. Really happy to hear that earlier as well. Local heat action plans should be part of this risk planning effort, in addition to national cooling action plans. So, we see that energy efficiency solutions are really essential to the least cost path, whether they're technology solutions, services solutions like a community cooling center, a policy solution like heat action plan or a regulation, or a financial solution like a pay-as-you-go model. You can actually follow, at SC4All, we have a campaign on this for our cooling effort called This Is Cool. And you can find it on our website, sc4all.org, or through social media if you look for hashtag This Is Cool, including some that we've been working for on the COVID-19 side. In terms of our partners, one I'd like to highlight that's working in some of the LDCs in Africa, in addition to other countries in Africa, is the Million Cool Roof Challenge, working in Nigeria, Rwanda, and Senegal in particular, in addition to a few others. That effort is actually looking to deliver what is a really cost-effective way of delivering that service, as I mentioned in the beginning. We also see that the high-level dialogue on energy, which will be in the fall, will be an important moment to develop what are called energy compacts. Within those energy compacts, we also think it's an opportunity to examine both the energy transition and the energy access measures. And certainly I hope that energy efficiency will be a really big part of that, as I'm sure that Irina really wants renewables to be a big part of that as well. So I think that's it for me. Back over to you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you very much for those very important remarks, and really again focusing on the broad impact that energy access has on the society, be it human, economic, environmental. It really has an impact on the whole society and the whole spectrum of the development and the developmental trajectory of a country, and absolutely key for all of the LDCs. And thank you also for Sustainable Energy for All for being such an important partner to many of the LDCs. Thank you for being with us. Now, next, I would like to give the floor to Mr. David Jackson, representing the UNCDF, Capital Development Fund. David, you have the floor.
Well, thank you so much indeed, Chair, and thank you so much indeed to colleagues and honourable participants. I would like to make two very specific points, I think, which I believe we should make sure are minuted into the results of our deliberations as part of this regional review and taken forwards. The first one was very well spoken by a number of the speakers, which is the need for direct access to climate finance by the least developed countries in Africa. And here I say direct access, because yes, there are lots of projects around, but climate finance and climate adaptation in particular for Africa needs to be something which is mainstreamed and baked into the global financial system. We'll see at this year's COP, but the scientists, as we all know, acknowledge now that it's highly unlikely, probably impossible, to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. We need to live for a different future, and we've always adapted as people to live on the planet, and we're now going to need to step up our game in terms of adapting to a hostile climate, which will affect our water quite significantly, our land use, the way that we can build our cities. It will need baked in institutional architectural features, not just projects. And fortunately, the government of Malawi, actually, through the representative of Perks Legoya at the United Nations, the PR, is the chair of the Local Climate Adaptive Living Facility, which has 22 countries, LDCs. And its purpose is to secure direct access to the Green Climate Fund and other vertical sources of climate finance that can deliver locally, through national systems, through local government transfers, through local chambers of commerce, through national systems, but reports globally. So I think the management and delivery locally, the reporting globally, it enables that aggregation. And this mechanism, which is managed by the LDCs, actually is very effective because it's not a project. So you don't have to buy the vehicles, hire the project managers, set up a whole parallel structure. Instead, you plug it in to your national adaptation system, and it enables direct access to Green Climate Fund and others. So the Local Climate Adaptive Living Facility, I believe it can be part of the way forwards. It has 4 ambassador countries: Ghana, Gambia, Mozambique, and Niger, and the ministers of environment of those countries are also working towards COP and to get it embedded in the LDC50 agenda, as mentioned earlier. So that's one thing I wanted to put on the table, and I think it's a good initiative that's led by the LDCs. The second one is the International Municipal Investment Fund. So this is a fund which is being established now. It'll be capitalized this year. It's managed by Meridiam in Paris. It's a private sector fund, and the big but is, its exclusive purpose is to invest in developing country cities and this kind of urban resilient infrastructure through long-term vehicles that can be co-financed with on domestic stock exchanges, with domestic banks, to kind of try to provide this kind of long-term infrastructure finance that is needed, because we know it's long-term finance to address some of these issues that have been mentioned. And again, I understand that we're working with our team on on a couple of waste to energy projects in Blantyre and Lilongwe, in Malawi in particular, where for this operation. But the bigger purpose here is that I think we need to have these architectural features again in terms of investment funds that work with governments but free up this subnational space. A government cannot borrow on its sovereign guarantee sufficient for the investment required, and on its own the private sector cannot come in just on its own. There needs to be a blend and a freeing up of the sub-sovereign space, and that's what this fund and other initiatives are doing. I'm pleased to say we're working with Chef Shwen in Morocco, for example, on a similar street lighting project, Kumasi, Ghana, on a light rail system, a number of other investments. So to conclude, the Local Climate Adaptive Living Facility, an LDC-led initiative for direct access to the Green Climate Fund, the International Municipal Investment Fund, which is coordinated the technical assistance facility through United Nations, UNCDF, and other agencies we're working with, can provide a pipeline of investment projects. But all of this will be key to creating the investment ecosystem to address the policy issues that have been mentioned, and including at this year's COP. So thank you so much indeed, colleagues. And adaptation will have to be a feature of LDC5, as will in transformational investment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, for that very important discussion on, finance adaptation and adaptation finance, and really providing us with concrete information on existing financial instruments that are important for the LDCs. And thank you also for being with us. UNCDF is, of course, a really important partner and focusing really only on the LDCs. So very important partner for us and for all the LDCs. Now it's my great pleasure to give the floor to the distinguished representative of Sierra Leone, Aminata Siddique. The floor is yours. Ms. Siddique, can you please unmute? If you are talking, you are muted, so unfortunately we cannot hear you. It looks like we don't have the opportunity. I'm looking at my technical team, whether they have a possibility. I would now like to give the floor, as we are waiting for Ms. Siddique, to give the floor to Mr. Mamadou Dia from Senegal. You have the floor.
Merci bien, Madame la directrice Heidi. Je voudrais remercier tous les panélistes et vous dire comment c'est important aujourd'hui de penser au développement des énergies renouvelables et l'adaptation au changement climatique. Au Sénégal, nous, aujourd'hui, on est à 22% en termes de production par rapport aux énergies renouvelables sur la production totale d'énergie. Et l'objectif, c'est d'arriver en 2024 à 30% et à 50% en 2030. Mais on sait que dans nos pays, les pays les moins avancés, l'une des contraintes structurelles, c'est surtout l'accès à l'énergie et l'accès à l'électricité. Nous avons au niveau des paiements les taux d'accès à l'énergie les plus faibles, surtout l'électricité, et également les coûts d'accès à l'électricité aussi les plus élevés, ce qui peut sembler paradoxal. Et si maintenant nous voulons aller vers le renforcement de la productivité et de la compétitivité des économies des paiements et arriver surtout à une transformation structurelle des économies, le rôle et la place que l'accès à l'énergie doit jouer. Et aujourd'hui, une question par rapport aux représentants du PNUE qui avait parlé de l'accès, quelle stratégie peut-être pourrait être développée non seulement pour permettre aux pays les moins avancés de pouvoir combler le gap énergétique, mais d'avoir accès à une énergie propre, mais à des coûts très faibles pour pouvoir prétendre à cette transformation structurelle, mais surtout augmenter l'accès des populations à l'énergie. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dia, for your discussion on energy access and the importance of the affordability also of the clean energy and what the options there are. And I would also like to take this opportunity to congratulate Senegal, because if I understand correctly, you have just been recommended or you have met the LDC graduation criteria for the first time, and that has happened just very recently. So I really like to congratulate Senegal for that very important milestone. Now I think that we were not able to solve the communication problem that we had with Sierra Leone, unfortunately. So now I would like to go back to the panelists who are still with us and are as you have heard, all the discussion, all the concerns. If you could give us just 1 minute of any final ideas, conclusions, recommendations. The more concrete you can be, the better. I would really like to hear from you any final reflections from this very interesting, really interesting and important panel that we have had. And I first would like to call on Mr. Francesco La Camera, Director General of IRENA.
Thank you. It's has been a very interesting discussion, and if I can conclude in 1 minute, my main point is human resources are key in this exercise, and naturally the building of projects that has to be in the context of a very well-designed energy planning, and is what we are trying to do in supporting country in the new round of NDC, their presentation. And I strongly encourage countries to send through the various platforms of ARENA ideas for projects. Together with our partners over the Climate Investment Platform, we will try to make the possible matching from projects and the financial resources needed. So this is the main message, trying to work. We are ready to work with you in all aspects and trying to go from the planning to the project and the real implementation and the changes needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director General, and thank you for being with us today and the important work that IRENA is doing and continues to do in support of LDCs. Next, I would like to invite Mustafa Bakouri, President and CEO of the Moroccan Agency for Sustainable Energy and co-lead for the Coalition for Sustainable Energy Access. Mr. Bakouri, any final reflections? The floor is yours.
Tout d'abord, pour féliciter tous les intervenants et pour la qualité de l'intervention, des interventions qui viennent, à mon sens, pour résumer en quelques instants, qui viennent reconfirmer le consensus qui est, à mon avis, plus important que jamais sur la nécessité de faciliter l'accès à l'énergie au PMA en particulier, et surtout l'énergie durable, et qu'il n'y a pas de contradiction entre l'accès à l'énergie et la protection de l'environnement, et capitaliser sur les nombreuses initiatives. Tout à l'heure, évidemment, vu le temps, il n'a pas été possible de mentionner certaines initiatives très concrètes, soit bilatérales, soit multilatérales. Je veux en citer deux sur l'Afrique très brièvement. Le Desert to Power qui concerne les pays du Sahel, où aujourd'hui, avec les 5 pays du Sahel, il y a des plans autour de certains projets très concrets, en particulier sur le solaire. Et l'autre initiative avec la Banque islamique de développement, toujours sur l'Afrique, des PMA africaines, où nous travaillons sur des projets très concrets. Pour dire que aujourd'hui, le travail qui est fait au niveau de l'ONU va permettre de fédérer et faciliter les synergies entre ces différentes initiatives pour accélérer la mise en œuvre des programmes pays par pays.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bakouri, for summarizing and for the important work that you are doing in support of the LDCs, and thank you very much for being with us today. I would like to now invite Eric Vanless from Rockefeller Foundation to give any 1 minute reflections that this panel has brought into your mind. Eric, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Heidi. To me, where we're at is we have the technology to do what needs to be done. We have the finance to fund what needs to be done, and we have the partners to execute on what needs to be done. And so I think we're at a time where the foundation and our partners are very interested in getting very specific on making this happen in specific countries. And so I'm hopeful and eager to get started and to continue the transition in the countries that are most in need.
Thank you very much, Eric, for your reflections, and look forward to continuing close collaboration with you. And thank you for the important work that you're doing and for being with us today. Next, I would like to invite Cecilia Yenga, Head of South Africa Office of UNEP. Cecilia, for any final reflections.
Thank you very much, moderator, and thank you very much, ministers, and especially Minister Tembo, for really calling on us and challenging us as UNEP in terms of intensifying our work. I see two possible opportunities. First, there is the opportunity where most of the LDCs will be reviewing their NDCs. What I have noticed in my review of various NDCs within the Africa continent is that they have extremely broad goals. I think we do have the opportunity of refining and making them more integrated, as I said, to look at the nexus issues. So how can we leverage from our mitigation actions where we are moving towards expanding to much more clean energy and leverage those to address our agriculture challenge, etc. I think secondly, where the gap is, we have lots of proliferation of good policies in our countries. Where we are lacking is basically on the implementation gap. And again, is moving from very broad stated goals to actual small, even if we call them small bits, but biteable bits, where we can be able to leverage and moving on to the financing question, seeing how we can integrate investment tools that can really respond to our various needs. The agricultural sector in many of our LDCs is mainly practiced by small-scale farmers. How can we leverage from nature-based solutions, ecosystem-based adaptation? Lots of the LDCs in this forum and across Africa are members of UNEP's ecosystem-based adaptation program. How can communal cooperatives also serve as a critical financing instrument for either agriculture, for energy, for water? How can we leverage? Many countries now do have policies for microgrids, finding the right investments to channel and energize the microgrids in order for them to feed and water Africa and LDCs in a better way. So I think those for me are two: the opportunity of the revision of NDCs and then strengthening our implementation frameworks where we can come and support you in terms of integrating both mitigation and adaptation approaches. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cecilia, for that important summary, and thank you for the excellent work that UNEP is doing in Africa, and in particular in this field of climate and climate resilience and energy. It is crucially important. Thank you very much to you for being with us today. Next, I would like to call Mr. Amjad Bashar, Head of UNDRR's Regional Office for Africa, for any final 1-minute reflections. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. I just have a very short intervention. I think one of the things that we've learned in the disaster risk management community, particularly as a result of COVID-19, is to understand that we're now defining disaster risk reduction. We have to address the systemic risk behind it, and everything seems to be cascading. All the work that we're talking about, all the discussion that we've had, they very much are interlinked with each other, and which we call systemic risk, and that's the root of the problem I think we need to address, and that requires really a whole of society approach, a multi-sectoral approach, and then we all have to work together to reduce risk and ensure that LDCs are not accumulating risk and creating new risk as they develop into the future. So that's just my message to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for those important reflections. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is really the last panel of this Africa Regional Review meeting, and I would like to, in this panel, also really pay tribute to Malawi, our host, in the way they have conducted and put together these meetings, and really the excellent setup and the quality of these different panels that we've had, and really thank you so much, Malawi, for the excellent hosting. And I have a great honor and pleasure to invite the two ministers from Malawi to give some closing reflections for our session. And I would first like to call upon Honorable Nancy Tembo, MP, Minister of Forest and Natural Resources of Malawi, just for a few minutes, because we have still one more coming up. Thank you.
Thank you, moderator. This is just to thank all the panelists and all the speakers for this great occasion where we've shared ideas. We can only build back better if we can share the experiences of from other countries, and that's the only way we can strengthen our fight against the climate change and the effects that it brings. For Malawi, we are set for to be a partner with our fellow LDC members, to work together, to plan together, and to strategize together. We are thankful for this opportunity and grateful for all the organizers of what they've put together, and hope to see you all again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. And now for the closing remarks, I would like to invite Honorable Newton Kambala, Minister of Energy of Malawi. So you have the floor.
Thank you very much, moderator. Actually, I would like to sincerely thank you for your skill in moderating this session. I sincerely would like to thank you on behalf of everybody. And I would also like to thank my colleague here, the Minister of Forest and Natural Resources in Malawi, Honorable Nancy Tembo, MP, for her contributions, and also the rest of the ministers and the rest of the panelists for the variable contributions. It has now become very obvious that this discussion has become a good starting point to enable us put our heads together to continue brainstorming and examining strategies and the best practices that could help us to enhance energy resilience and energy transition in Africa, or LDCs and Haiti, in the wake of the impact of the climate change in energy sector. It is also pleasing to note that we all agree that we should not leave anybody, not even a single household, behind. And Malawi is therefore very pleased to take on a leadership role as champion for energy access. And I would want to wish everybody well and a good night for those of us who are in the night. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for your kind words and the excellent summary that you have had, and again, our deep gratitude for your hosting this meeting in such an excellent manner. So, ladies and gentlemen, at this end of this panel, it is my great pleasure to, from my heart, thank all of the panelists. They have brought such important views into this discussion. And there are just very few issues that I would like to highlight. It's clear that climate change is an increasing threat to African LDCs and has the potential to roll back hard-won economic gains due to their current low adaptive capacity. Despite the many challenges, LDCs have continued to show strong political leadership on climate action that came out very strongly in many of the ministers' interventions. And this is very much consistent with the 1.5 pathways that we have committed to. There is an urgent need for the international community to scale up support directed towards building institutional capacity, improving coordination and addressing financial constraints to meaningfully implement national adaptation plans. An integrated approach to climate action, not just looking at climate ambition, but also the wider social economic benefits, environmental benefits. Investing in job creation and promoting equitable growth is key to long-term resilience building. Despite the extraordinary growth potential for the energy sector in LDCs, these countries rarely benefit from larger financing schemes to the same extent as others, more prosperous developing countries. Something needs to be done about this. We must seize opportunities to integrate energy transition as an integral part of post-COVID recovery plans that can stimulate economies as well as mitigate climate risks. Sustainable energy should therefore be one of the central thematic topics of the new 10-year program of action for LDCs, which will be adopted at the 5th UN conference on the LDCs in 2022. So with those few reflections, I would once again like to thank the panelists, the ministers in particular who have been with us. Thank you so much. And all of you, each and every one, we've had a very good participation in this session. I thank you all for being there, and I hope that we can continue working together strongly on these issues in the pathway of the Doha conference in January 2022. With these words, I would like to close this session and invite you all to the high-level closing session, which will start in just a few minutes at 10 a.m. New York time at 5 o'clock Malawi time. Thank you again, and wishing you all a very good rest of the day. Thank you for being with us.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Shall we start the session?
Yes.
Thank you very much. So, welcome to the closing session. Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, and all distinguished participants, we have now reached the end of the Africa Regional Review meeting, and I can truly say it was a great success and benefiting greatly from all the interactions among the different stakeholders. But let us first turn to the adoption of the draft political declaration by the LDCs from Africa and Haiti. This document has been distributed in English by the delegation of Malawi in New York through your missions. The political declaration was extensively considered by our experts in New York and respective capitals and agreed by consensus after several rounds of consultations. I believe we all have seen the text earlier and endorsed it. With this understanding, I would like to place this draft political declaration before you for adoption. And to say further that if there is no objection, the political declaration is hereby adopted. As you know, in addition to the main program, we also had 3 very interesting side events. First, on Tuesday, we had a side event on youth, our SDG accelerators in LDCs, organized by the government of Malawi with the support of the UN Malawi Resident Coordinator's Office. Second, 2 events on Wednesday. One on empowering LDCs through science, technology, and innovation, lessons learned, organized by the UN Technology Bank for the LDCs. And the other was on impacts of COVID-19 on SMEs in LDCs and the role of blended finance in supporting a resilient recovery, organized by the UN Capital Development Foundation. I would now like to give the floor to the organizers of the side events to each provide us with the highlights of the side events in 5 minutes. And I am going to be very strict on time. First, I would like to give the floor to Honorable Unemu Sungama MP, who is the Minister of Youth and Sports in the Republic of Malawi, to give an overview of the outcomes of the side event on youth as SDGs accelerators in the LDCs. Honorable Unemu Sungama, you have 5 minutes to tell us. Over to you, sir.
Right Honorable Dr. Saulos Kraus Chilima, the Vice President of the Republic of Malawi, fellow ministers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to provide a summary of the side events theme, Youth Sustainable Development Goals, Accelerators in Least Developed Countries. That was co-hosted by the government of Malawi and the United Nations Malawi on Tuesday, 23rd February. The main objective of the event was to showcase inspiring and innovative initiatives presently championed by the youth in Malawi and how they are helping to transform communities, as well as providing a platform for sharing ideas on how to achieve sustainable development in least developed countries by 2030. The side event also intended to influence policymakers participating in the African Region Review meeting to focus their attention on youth and SDGs, accelerators in their preparations for the 5th UN Conference on LDC. I am happy to report that we provided an interactive learning platform where youth in Malawi and across Africa were able to appreciate what their colleagues are doing and had the opportunity to ask questions to gain insights on how the initiatives could be emulated elsewhere, and applauded the exhibitions that were showcased and the youth discussions on several social media platforms, including the page for the 5th UN Conference on LDCs. This will help to continue to raise awareness on youth potential and issues that were raised during the event beyond this meeting. The key messages that the youth themselves delivered for our government's attention and consideration included the following. Number one, LDCs will not achieve sustainable development if the majority of the population, including the youth, are left out of national development processes. Government should meaningfully engage young people and provide a conducive environment for the youth to participate at all levels of decision making. And the government should put in place deliberate systems and platforms that help strengthen them and maintain engagement, social contact, dialogue, and trust with young people. This should include treating the youth not only as beneficiaries, but key partners in development by taking on board their ideas on matters concerning socio-economic development. There should be provision for enough opportunities and the necessary incentives to effectively develop the potential of the youth through capital financing, linkage to market both locally and internationally, and exposing the youth to fully exploit their potential. The need for LDCs to reform education system to allow for the development of skills and talents that are consistent with the demands of the job market. That should include preparing the young people for digital age and awareness on the importance of conserving the environment as we fight against climate change challenges. As we build up the 5th UN Conference on LDCs in Doha in January 2022, I hereby appeal to my fellow ministers and all development partners to recognize the potential that the youth have in attaining sustainable socio-economic transformation in LDCs, which can only be harnessed in LDC if LDC create a conducive environment for the youth to take action.
You should be winding down, Honourable Minister.
Be rest assured, I'll be winding in less than a minute. Government's strategic partnership with the youth in leveraging their innovation, creative ideas, and resourcefulness cannot be overemphasized. Also, government and international development agencies must take into consideration youth employment, skills development, and gender empowerment as top priorities in all national, regional, and international development agenda. In the face of no action, LDC risks a broken social fabric and an exodus of youth elsewhere in search of opportunities. More importantly, we are unlikely to end poverty, ensure gender equality, reverse climate change, and achieve the SDGs by 2030 if we fail to empower our young people. I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Sugama, the Minister of Youth and Sports in the Republic of Malawi, for this stimulating perspective. We recall that on Monday, Mr. Nixon Kasolene, the representative of the youth, said, I quote, Young people are necessary resources that need to be maximized and constitute an opportunity for our progress. It is young people's rights to be included in processes that affect their present and future. Nothing about us without us, end quote. I'm sure this also summarizes the views of our youth. To proceed, I would now like to give the floor to Mr. Joshua Setipa, Managing Director of the UN Technology Bank for LDCs, to present highlights on the side event held by the bank on the theme, Empowering LDCs through Science, Technology and Innovation, Lessons Learned. Mr. Setipa, you have the floor and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Dr. Chilima, Vice President and Chair of the Africa Regional Review Meeting, Honorable Ministers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to first congratulate the government of Malawi for successfully hosting this Africa Regional Review Meeting this week. Several sessions and side events held this week have provided the platform for sharing a wealth of knowledge, experiences and opportunities for the LDCs to prepare for the 5th UN Conference for LDCs. Chair, I have the honor to present the summary report of the side event organized by the UN Technology Bank in collaboration with the government of Malawi, the government of Turkey, and the UN Economic Commission for Africa under the theme, Empowering LDCs through Science, Technology and Innovation, Lessons Learned. The side event featured the Technology Bank's activities which support LDCs in enhancing their science, technology and innovation capacity to build sustainable and productive capacities and promote structural economic transformation and early results in selected African LDCs. The event also outlined the challenges faced by LDCs as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and how to build better in the post-COVID-19 recovery. The event was graced by the following dignitaries: His Excellency Mr. Gospel Kazako, the Minister of Information of the Republic of Malawi, the Honorable Dr. Elioda Tumsewe, the Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation of Uganda, Dr. Solomon Benwa, Director General of Science, Research Affairs, Minister of Science and Higher Education of Ethiopia, Professor Hassan Manda, President of the Scientific and Technological Research Council of Turkey, Dr. Victor Konde, Scientific Affairs Officer of the UN Commission for Africa. And the following is a summary of the outcome of the discussions in this event. The following key messages came up as an outcome of this session, Mr. Chairman. The first is that science and technology and innovation is critical for the development and achievement of sustainable development. Second, capacity development is critical for building productive capacities and structural transformation. And third, enhancing research and development capacity in LDCs to facilitate commercialization of innovations is critically important. Fourth, that STI should be integrated into national development plans and through partnerships and coordination across the ecosystem. Fifth, sustainable development requires precision development and innovation from basic sciences to engineering, as well as in the social sciences and humanities. And sixth, that digital transformation and ICT connectivity are critical to stimulate competitiveness and facilitate the export of value-added products from the LDCs. And seventh, increasing investment in STI and R&D through collaboration between the private sector and academia to enhance innovation and competitiveness is also very critical. And eighth, facilitating technology transfer to LDCs and promotion of awareness of intellectual property rights to protect innovation from LDCs is also equally important. And last but not least, providing financial and in-kind resources to the Technology Bank to continue supporting the LDCs to enhance the STI capacities is also very critical. I thank you, Chair, for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Setipa, for actually doing it in less than 5 minutes. We know that science, technology, and innovation was certainly one of the most discussed issues in the week. It is pivotal to all dimensions of development, from productive capacity to social sectors. It is also crucial to end the COVID-19 pandemic and prepare us for future crises. And to share the last, insights on the third event, it will be Ms. Preti Senior, who is the Executive Secretary of the UN Capital Development Fund, and she'll be talking to us about financing for SMEs in LDCs and the role of blended finance in supporting a resilient recovery from COVID-19.
Hello, I hope everybody can hear me. So, good morning, good afternoon, excellencies, ambassadors, permanent representatives, colleagues. I would like to bring to you the results that we discussed during the session, as the chair just pointed out, on the impact of COVID-19 on SMEs in LDCs and the role of blended finance in supporting a resilient recovery. We started this session with my colleagues from UNCDF giving an overview of our blended finance report regarding investment in the LDCs. As we know, the amount of the blended finance going into LDCs is not large. And this is something we would like to tackle as an outcome of this Africa Regional Review. We would like to increase the amount and size of blended finance going into the LDCs. So therefore, we have to address some of the discussion items as to what is the current situation and what needs to be done. So first, there was a point made about the lack of knowledge, perhaps, of the markets. So we feel that the global capital markets need further exposure to the LDCs, to the governance, to the opportunities there. In that context, the difficulty in terms of the size of the deals going into the LDCs versus the size of investment made, you know, an example was given that a conversation held with a $90 billion fund managed by 7 people has a minimum ticket size of 1 billion. So what can we do to increase or aggregate projects in LDCs so that we can tap some of the bigger flows of capital? So there was a point around the aggregation that might be needed for us to come together in the countries and create perhaps a portfolio of, let's say, solar energy projects. So then that becomes a bigger sort of investment opportunity. So this whole discussion about the real or perceived risk aspects is a key item, and therefore we need to address it. And one of the solutions was, which I would like to support, is engaging the ministers directly with some of the institutional investors in the presence of donors and UN as intermediating or creating that kind of information flow between the two sides. So we proposed to the Minister of Industry of Malawi, who was on that session, that we could have a sort of a virtual, at the moment, a roadshow, where we would make a panel where we could have the LDC ministers and we could have institutional investors and donors and UNCDF. So that was one concrete sort of outcome that came out of this discussion. There was discussion also that there are challenges even on domestic capital markets, that the domestic banks are also little risk averse of investing in SMEs. And as we know, SMEs form the backbone of the LDCs. So what can we do to encourage domestic banks to lend? And again, this whole concept of guarantees, of first loss, all these items that could help private capital move into an investment strategy for SMEs and LDCs are things that we need to deliberate and work upon. So even engaging the domestic banks and seeing what could be methods by which they would be then willing to lend to SMEs in their own economies is something we need to discuss. So that would be an outcome number 2 from this session. We had an interesting mix of ministers and blended fund. UNCDF is working with a fund we are creating called Build, which is to invest in SMEs in the LDC. So we had the fund manager there. We had somebody who runs Convergence, which is a blended finance sort of forum. And there was very interesting discussion between the size of the capital markets in the LDCs, the perception of risk, the economies, the deals that need to be made. So we would like to encourage a very strong pipeline development coming out of the LDCs. And this is a role that UNCDF as well plays. My colleagues work very closely with several of the governments in creating these bankable projects. So what we try to do is use catalytic capital that could seed either the entrepreneurs or the agencies so that bigger money can be unlocked. So very key on unlocking larger capital with an injection of seed capital to unlock that aspect of investment. So we would feel in general, we need to increase the information as well flowing from the LDCs. There's a lack of information in terms of economy and deals and projects, and therefore this sort of lack of access of data by investors is also another point that needs to be addressed so that, again, that flow can be more smooth and greater. So the whole focus for this panel was on blended finance. And we also had contributions by donors. And the donors are very much present and willing to be with the LDCs. We were deliberating ways on which to make ODA more catalytic. So again, if those blended funds means that the first loss is provided by the donor, and then an additional larger amount can be galvanized from the private sector. So using ODA more catalytically was a discussion that was also held. So I believe those would be some of the key points of greater information, greater project pipeline, more data on one hand, and more engagement, direct engagement, perhaps very qualified people on both sides. Perhaps it needs a forum to bring the direct connection to the table, and creating catalytic capital, which can unlock greater capital. So these were some of the recommendations while realizing the difficulties that the SMEs are having, and the impact of COVID is direct on them. So both with global markets and also with domestic capital markets, working with domestic banks. So we would like to put this on the agenda. So broadly, I would say maybe these 4 or 5 points would be some things we would like to take forward from this meeting. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cecilia, for flagging those important issues on financing, as well as letting us to focus on innovative sources and explore what form of finance is best for which purpose, and also how the risks can actually be shared. As we move on, I would like now to invite Her Excellency Fikita Chukamanu, the High Representative for LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDs, and Secretary General for the 5th UN Conference on LDCs, for her closing remarks. You have the floor, Excellency.
Thank you, Your Excellency Dr. Chilima, Vice President of the Republic of Malawi, Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. We are closing a week-long, intense, enlightening, and productive conversation. I express my deep gratitude to you, Dr. Chilima, and to the government of the Republic of Malawi for hosting us. Thank you so much for making us feel like being in the warm heart of Africa. We received such great collaboration at all levels, from Ambassador Ligoya and the mission here in New York to the coordination team in Lilongwe. We owe a special thanks also to the resident coordinator, Maria Jose Macho, and her team for their partnership. More than 900 registered participants were with us for these 5 days. 28 out of 33 African LDCs plus Haiti were represented. His Excellency Dr. Chagwira, President of the Republic of Malawi, addressed us. We heard from many ministers and other officials from LDCs. We heard from development partners, from representatives of the private sector and civil society, including academia and youth. We are, of course, grateful to all of you for sharing your experience and insights. It was a dialogue and participation needed to move forward. We learned a lot from each other, and we must continue the discussion started this week. This could also have not been done without the support of the government of Turkey and Qatar. It was also a truly one UN meeting. I especially thank FAO, UNDP, the Technology Bank, and UNCDF for the excellent collaboration to make this meeting a success. Representatives from almost 30 United Nations organizations shared their analysis and ideas on how to go forward on our road to Doha, Qatar for the 5th UN Conference on LDCs in January 2022. We look forward to continuing the work with all of you over the next 11 months. The summary of the meeting will feed into the work of the Preparatory Committee. The first meeting of the Preparatory Committee will take place at the end of May. You can find information on the entire preparatory process for LDC5 on OHR LLS website. We've had a rich discussion and brought together concrete ideas. I cannot possibly summarize them all right now, but let me highlight a few key points. Just as elsewhere, COVID-19 has profoundly serious consequences for the lives and livelihoods of LDCs in Africa and Haiti. Building back better will be a challenge, but there is hope when people and countries work together. For example, Senegal is sharing technology and vaccines with neighbors, and several development partners recognize the need for solidarity and are increasing resources for COVAX and other global initiatives. Several speakers mentioned that the pandemic, while it affects everyone in different ways, also presents an opportunity to do things differently and accelerate true transformation. One example is the need to transform the digital divide into a digital bridge. For this, we need to make sure an ecosystem of digital transformation is in place. This includes affordable broadband access and digital fluency with the right skills, especially for young people. Digital transformation goes so very much beyond improving productive capacity. It can give a voice to people, create an innovative partnership, and indeed a bridge between so many and on so much. Then there's the important area of trade. The recently launched Africa Continental Free Trade Area provides additional market access opportunities for African LDCs. There's great untapped potential in e-commerce and opportunities for LDCs to integrate into regional and global value chains. Of course, physical infrastructure like transport systems is important, but investing in and making the soft infrastructures, including regulatory, customs, and business environment work is equally important. Aid for trade plays a critical role. We must look into strengthening those sectors and value chains that have the greatest potential for poverty reduction and inclusiveness and streamlining of the gender dimension. Just this morning, we talked about climate risks and how sustainable energy can be part of the solution. If we do not take mitigation and adaptation to climate change more seriously, we will not achieve any of our goals. If we just look at agriculture, which is the sector with the highest employment in almost all African LDCs in Haiti, it is clear that poverty and hunger are bound to increase if we do not reduce CO2 emissions. But there are also many solutions available, and these will be further discussed at COP26 in November this year. OHR LLS has provided support to Malawi to develop access to sustainable energy in the country. We plan to provide a platform to share Malawi's experience with other LDCs. These opportunities for peer learning are crucial to share lessons and concrete solutions. Of course, a lot of this hinges on the availability of resources. The LDCs need to put their resources into action and prioritize inclusive and sustainable development for all their citizens. All stakeholders need to stop the diversion of resources, be it through illicit financial flows or corruption. There's also the need for more external finance, but the right kind. This ranges from ODA that is effectiveness in includes being aligned with country priorities and supports the mobilization of other resources, includes improving tax administrations, and includes looking for blended finance. It also includes working towards changing the risk perception of LDCs. It also means that it is now that we must deal with unsustainable debt levels. Measures must be taken that are responsible, innovative, and lead to long-term solutions, such as debt cancellation, debt swaps, and debt workouts. Last but by no means least, we need to work more closely with the private sector. We are often told money is there, but we need to channel private finance into sustainable development action that contributes to job creation. We need a better policy environment and conditions for micro, small, and medium enterprises. We should pay special attention to enterprises run by women and ensure they can be more productive and contribute towards transforming LDC's economies. I would like to close my remarks by highlighting the importance of youth in this process. I'm grateful for the youth representatives that took the time to contribute to our discussion. We need your optimism, but also your realism. You know that the problems we face are huge, but we have the power to solve them if we work together in solidarity. We need to listen more to you. We need to much more intergenerational dialogue, and this is your future we're talking about. There's a lot of work ahead. Failure is not an option, and we must craft a roadmap for a better future for the LDCs together. For this to work, we need political will and effective partnerships across all sectors and all borders. We must build back better and greener for all and enhance the resilience to future shocks. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for those encouraging remarks. And at this juncture, I would like to invite the Honourable Minister from Lesotho, Honourable Mohapinyane, the Minister of Energy and Meteorology of Lesotho, to deliver a vote of thanks. You have the floor, Honourable Minister.
Right Honorable Dr. Saulos Klaus Chilima, Vice President of the Republic of Malawi, Madam Pekitamuela Katwaweti Kamano, sorry if I misspelled the name, Under Secretary General OHR LLS and Secretary General of LDC5. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I take the floor today to express gratitude on behalf of all the delegates to the Republic of Malawi for hosting this meeting. To the various ministers, ministries, and departments for their commitment and tireless effort to make this meeting a success. That is evident from the large number of registration and participation in the different sessions. I would also like to thank the UN Secretariat with special mention to OHR, LLS, and UNECA for their logistical and behind-scenes support. I note the time difference that exists between the different participants, and thank you to all colleagues and delegates in the various roles they have played, be it moderator, panelist, discussant, and most importantly, participants for making this meeting and its discussions beneficial to all of us. As a result, we managed to engage more on lessons learned and how to improve the implementation of LDC agenda through promoting private sector, especially the micro, small and medium enterprises, mobilization of financial resources for sustainable development, enhancing trade, improving productive capacities, and building a conducive infrastructure platform and enhanced technology base. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, COVID-19 has impacted the way we work as evidenced by this virtual setting in which we have met. This has confirmed even further that we indeed must explore more innovative ways of implementing the next program of action and other development agendas if we are to realize the desired outcomes for sustainable and equitable economic growth in our Africa region. With the virtual setting, we have shown that we will not let the current situation derail us from our plans and hope that we have for the future of our continent. It also indicates and highlights the keen interest that we have in LDC's issues and wide efforts being made to find solutions to LDC's challenges in pursuit of a dynamic, action-oriented and transformative program of action with strengthened partnerships in the next decade. In that regard, it is encouraging to know that these meetings were attended by all categories of stakeholders, including the private sector, NGOs, the youth, and international organizations. For those who could not make it to these meetings, we invite you to participate in all other forthcoming meetings on the road to Doha for the LDC5 conference. We look forward to continued engagement by all stakeholders and parties and trust that we will all be together in Doha 2022. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister, for that vote of thanks. We have a slot just in case there are representatives of member states that would like to make, any remarks, one or two, really for 1 minute each. And if there is none, I can proceed with my closing remarks. Anybody? Right. Thank you very much. Once again, Excellencies and distinguished delegates, let me close as follows, and I'll take it in 6 or 7 parts. First, lessons learned. We started this meeting by reflecting on the implementation of the Istanbul Program of Action, which is coming to an end. There are many lessons to be learned, but I think the most important one is that we need to improve on actions so that we achieve what we agree. It is therefore crucial to link the decade of action for the SDGs to the upcoming program of action. And this is the one in 2022. The second is the COVID-19. We also discussed how COVID-19 is reversing our hard-won development gains. We're aware that this is true for all countries, but for the LDCs, it has worsened our vulnerabilities, including those from climate change, which may prolong our recovery. We are hopeful, however, that we will be finding innovative ways to build back better, cleaner, and stronger. The role of institutions in discussing the nexus between peace and development, we highlighted the strong institutional and systems, including the rule of law, human rights, and justices, are fundamental pillars of sustainable development. Regional and international trade. We also reiterated the importance of enhancing intra-African regional trade through the African Continental Free Trade Agreement and efforts of integrating LDCs into the multilateral trade system through enhanced transport infrastructure networks and improved productive capacity of our economies. Our discussions highlighted the roles that various initiatives of the World Trade Organization and other institutions such as Aid for Trade, Enhanced Integrated Framework, and Special and Differential Preferences, among others, play in scaling up trade competitiveness and effective participation of LDCs in both regional and global value chains. Domestic and international resource mobilization. We agreed on the need for more strategic and innovative ways of resource mobilization, particularly in capital markets for LDCs. We discussed how essential it is to lower the cost of remittances to allow for expansion in domestic resource mobilization by diversifying our resource pool to private financing. Furthermore, we noted the need to accelerate financial inclusion through the adoption of financial technology fintech solutions, which will catalyze domestic resources and help build inclusive digital economies, which are crucial for enhanced resilience to shocks. We concluded on the establishment of frameworks for partnerships among LDCs for long-term resolution on the debt crisis. We also shared the impacts of illicit financial flows that divert resources from the SDGs and the need for reforms and partnerships at regional and global levels to help them. Structural transformation. LDCs have to embrace structural transformation, which entails the transitioning from agriculture to manufacturing, innovations to utilize our abundant resources, and focus on value creation and retention in the value chain. ICT is a crucial tool to achieving such transformation and should be deployed as a key enabler in unlocking economic activities. This transformation should be inclusive and must embrace both women and the youth. While we cannot ever exhaust every aspect discussed in this meeting, I can assure you that all the ideas for a new program of action will be included in the summary report, and this report will be submitted to the preparatory committee of the 5th UN Conference on LDCs, which will feed into a new program for action for the LDCs. Before closing the meeting, allow me to thank Her Excellency Chingamanu and your team, which coordinated with us in Lilongwe for the tremendous work done in organizing this meeting. Our teams have worked together tirelessly to ensure its success. I further wish to thank the rest of the UN agencies that contributed to the success of this meeting, starting with the Economic Commission for Africa, which co-organized the meeting with us, and the resident coordinator, and the whole UN team here in Malawi, who helped us with organization, including the youth side events. In addition, I wish to give special thanks to the Office of the Special Advisor on Africa, the Food and Agriculture Organization, and the United Nations Development Programme for co-organizing individual sessions. I know that there are many more who contributed to the success of this meeting, not least all the distinguished speakers and panelists who generously shared their time and ideas with us. I assure you that your input will feed into the LDC5 process. I would also like to thank all participants for your active participation and substantive contributions. I look forward to meeting you again, and hopefully in person, latest at the LDC5 conference in Doha in January 2022. At last but not least, I would like to thank the government of Turkey for hosting LDC4 conference and the government of Qatar as host of incoming LDC5 for their invaluable support to the cause of the LDCs. There is a lot of work ahead of us, but together we can achieve an ambitious outcome of the 5th UN Conference on LDCs in Doha, Qatar in January 2022. A new program of action that will guide us on how to achieve truly sustainable development and a better future for our people. With all that said, I declare the Africa Regional Review meeting closed. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.